Please welcome Sarah.
Thanks. Hey guys, great to be here with you today. As mentioned, I'm Sarah Bellos, CEO and founder of Stony Creek Colors. My presentation for you today is maybe going to take a little bit of a different tilt for someone to explain a little bit about why I started Stony Creek Colors, really what were the big challenges that we were trying to solve for, and lead you just through a little bit about a background about the business model and how we work. And then towards the end of the presentation, with the remaining time, I'll give you just a little bit of a backstory into how I got to where I am today. So, title of my presentation, Dreams to Reality, Creating a Better World Business Through Collaboration. The point of collaboration for me, and really, I take that to mean not just working with other people, but really learning from them, and as some of the earlier speakers really reiterated in terms of saying, tell me more, or really inviting a conversation around what space do we want to see created, what is the future we want to see. It's very important, I think, that we look outside of ourselves in sort of a narrow view of one solution to a problem and realize that problems have many solutions, and really what's needed is someone to just set down a road of solving for them, because no matter what you think about your solution, inevitably it's going to change, and hopefully it will change because other people will collaborate with you and bring their ideas in as well. So to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts about Stony Creek Colors in general, many of you may know that there's a dirty secret in fashion. The colors that are used to dye the clothing that we wear are a huge source of environmental and human health problems. So every color that we're wearing, for the most part, comes from decayed dinosaurs. It's all based on a petrochemical economy. So if you track the carbon molecules that are in the clothing you're wearing, they are from literally like the carbon building blocks from benzene and petroleum. About 17% of the world's water pollution from industrial sources is actually from textile dyeing and finishing. Those are things we don't see in the United States because most textile manufacturing doesn't take place in the United States anymore, and certainly not the textile dyeing. But it's not just the putting the color on the cloth that's polluting, it's really also the synthesis of those chemistries in the first place. So when synthetic colors came around about 150 years ago, replacing the natural dyes that used to be used for all clothing that we were wearing in olden times, it was really a revolution and a really exciting time for the chemical industry. Now you could have color on demand. You didn't have to wait for the plant to grow and it to be summertime in order to do indigo dyeing. But that really evolved into a much more negative industry. A lot of chemical manufacturing left the United States because we have an EPA and we have OSHA and regulations that keep the workers safe, keep people that live around factories safe. But really what that meant was it didn't change the way chemistries were being made. It didn't make them more sustainable. It just moved to other countries that didn't have that type of manufacturing. So today there is absolutely no synthetic indigo made in the United States anymore, even though indigo is used to dye blue jeans, which literally is an American invention. So we totally rely on countries like China that are producing over 90% of the world's indigo. But as you may imagine, it doesn't have to be that way. There are solutions that are found in plants. And so Stony Creek Colors is part of this revolution of saying, how do we create the chemicals that we need instead of taking them from decaying dinosaurs and benzene and petroleum resources? Why don't we create renewable chemistries from plants that can be grown right in our own backyards and in our neighboring fields? So here's a slide of 2 indigo plants. As mentioned, we grow crops that we contract with farmers to grow crops and bring those plants to our factory to turn it into a blue dye. And so there's a couple of really huge differences between the way that we manufacture our chemicals and the way that synthetic indigo is made. And we're not going to really go in the weeds here, literally, but the big takeaway is the slide on the right, which is the natural indigo, is you might see a lot of circles. So the way that we produce our chemicals is really part of this emerging trend towards a more circular economy. It's not the linear, I made a pair of sneakers, I wore them for 6 months, I threw them in a landfill, the product will never break down. That's a very linear economy. A circular economy is one that looks at all of the raw materials that you're putting into a product, saying, how can I really close the loop on this item? Maybe it's going to be compostable. Maybe I'm not going to put toxic chemicals in the beginning so that when I try to have a recyclable product at the end, I have to recycle something that's carcinogenic or very harmful. So from everything from reusing our wastewater to composting the biomass after we extract dye from it, all of those things are very much part of the effort that we do at Stony Creek Colors to just take a more holistic approach to our chemical manufacturing. I mentioned composting. There are other really exciting things around sustainable agriculture. That was something that very much motivated me in starting the company, which I'll get to. But when you have your own manufacturing, you also have a lot of opportunities to really take a critical look and a hard look at how those processes and products are being created. Really briefly, just to compare that to the making of synthetic indigo, which I mentioned is pretty much all done in China. You have about 8 or 9 input chemistries that are all either harmful to human health, carcinogenic, mutagenic, poisonous to aquatic life. So things like formaldehyde, you might know, that's not something you want to ingest. Cyanide, it takes over ½ a pound of cyanide to make 1 pound of indigo, plus all these other chemicals. So when we are importing fabrics or denim dyed with indigo and not really knowing the backstory of what's really on the clothing that we're wearing, we're supporting an economy, and we're giving our money to really less intentional forms of manufacturing. At the end of the day, you can choose either one of these 2 pathways and get to the same thing, which is a high purity indigo product. It wasn't always, it hasn't been easy for us to make a competitive product to synthetic indigo. Our product from Stony Creek Colors is the highest purity natural indigo that you can find anywhere in the world. That we didn't get to overnight. It's been a really long time to get there, but now our indigo can be used as a drop-in replacement for the synthetic indigo that you saw made through the other benzene and petrochemical pathway. So ultimately, this allows us to sell clean and safe plant-based dyes into first the textile industry, soon into the cosmetics industry, so that our customers, like fashion brands, and their customers, like all of you, can find traceable and environmentally conscious premium products. That was a slide of some blue jeans that were dyed with our indigo. So I think that for us, and really along this theme of collaboration and envisioning the future, we knew in creating this business that we don't want to only be a company focused on indigo, but we really needed one success story that would help us take our product out into the market and prove that customers wanted to make this transition towards more renewable colors. So the way that this works really, and we call this our whole closet approach or seed to closet approach, is starting with the indigo plants. So we do everything from plant breeding to agronomic trials out in the field. We have a plant scientist that runs our research farm. Then we work with production farmers, mostly former tobacco farmers around Robertson County, Tennessee, some around Franklin, Kentucky area, Adairville, to grow indigo plants. And then our team actually has developed a specialized way to harvest the plants themselves. So unlike tobacco, you don't have to hand harvest it, you don't have to dry it in a barn, you don't have to spend all winter stripping it. You can have really like a plug and play crop for farmers that's a little bit higher value than the corn or soy that they may be otherwise growing. Ultimately, the product comes back to our factory where we extract it, and we also have a pretty big research effort in sustainable chemistries that I can touch on kind of more in the one-on-one panel time too, if chemistry is of interest to you guys. That is a product that we then take to textile mills and is bought by brands like Levi's, Patagonia is using our natural indigo, Lucky brand, lots of really awesome companies that, when I was starting this business was not, I had no idea what the path would be, right? So it's really exciting to actually see your dye in these major brands. The business model I kind of touched on in that circular approach. This is just another way of looking at it. We work to grow the plants for the farmers in their old tobacco greenhouses. They plant the crop in the field, and then we bring it to our factory to extract it, and the brands take it to market. So really, when we were looking for how do we best collaborate with farmers, we wanted to reduce the friction as much as possible to say, if your uncle is a tobacco farmer and his contract's getting cut, what's a thing that he can grow that doesn't require a ton of equipment investment and is also, can you guys hear me okay? All right, that doesn't require a ton of new equipment for him, where he's going to be really well supported in terms of knowing the best practices for growing the crop, but being able to grow a specialty value-added crop. As was mentioned, I have my undergrad degree from the ag school at Cornell. I had actually started in engineering, and I was not that into it. And so I moved into a major called natural resource management that allowed me to take business classes, policy, and still kind of have an emphasis on the science side of really our natural world. And what I was really inspired by then and continued to be today is this focus on sustainable agriculture. There are so many exciting and innovative things happening on farms today in the United States, around the world, around carbon sequestration, no-till, increasing yields through agronomic practices that are renewable and regenerative. And so I think that that's something that we really work to build through the business. I'm not going to go through this whole list of them. One thing that's really exciting is a couple of our crops are legumes, so they actually fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. The air around us is 72% nitrogen. Has anyone ever heard of using nitrogen to grow crops before and know why we do that? Anyone from a farm family here? Okay, so I won't call you out, but I'll tell everyone since I didn't see a ton of hands. Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are really essential macronutrients for growing crops. But when you add too much nitrogen, it contributes to huge water pollution problems in the Gulf of Mexico, for example. A lot of it leaches away. So adding that nutrient through crops that grew the previous year is a really exciting way that farmers can bring health back into their soil. And so we want to actually pay them to grow those crops instead of it being like a whole wasted season that you had to grow a cover crop just to get those benefits. So that's one of the exciting things that you can do when you have a company, and you can just incentivize people through paying them instead of like asking them to do something just because it's the right thing to do. Something that I am less involved with at the company, but through collaboration, we've brought in some really exciting partners and scientists to be able to really further the chemistry research that's done at Stony Creek Colors and collaborations with other textile dye houses. Another way that we I really grew the business beyond my sort of innate skill set. I mentioned I'm an engineering school dropout, so I didn't design our factory. I have engineers on our team that we work to figure out how are we going to do the process in year one, and every year we keep iterating through that processing. So at our factory in Springfield, we have chemical operators, we have ag operators, we have engineers, and so we are all working together towards this real goal of how do we make the bio-based colors of the future, and how do we really scale up the use of these chemicals by industry, but also scale up their production, because until we reach kind of this critical mass, it will always just be a niche market. So for us, really, that's challenging, right? A lot of chemical manufacturing places are just literally bringing in like drums of cyanide or benzene. They're not wondering, did it rain today and can I get my harvester in the field? So having a resilient team has been a really important part of planning and having contingencies in place, but also recognizing that what we're trying to do, bridging these fresh agricultural biomass and feedstock for our family with the manufacturing, it has its fair share of challenges, and so making sure that all our departments are kind of working in unison and collaborating is really, really critical. Ultimately, you'll see a lot of colors on this slide, right? We are not just doing indigo. We have research into dyes like from black walnut, which are literally just falling from trees and like not ending up in any kind of useful product. So we can extract a color from the hull of that, from Osage orange, from some other products that are reds, and from like food resource waste. So a lot of exciting opportunity in expanding new markets that for plants that have previously maybe been used at an artisan level, but we're never sort of taken that step to bridge chemical engineering with agricultural and agronomic research, and ultimately the manufacturing piece. So when I started the business, the groups that are up on this board, like having a certified bio-based product, that wasn't even a thing that really existed. So in really designing the business model, there have been so many iterations, and really the business has gotten better through collaboration, when I recognized the need for the company in the first place, I was running a totally different business with my sister. Not totally different, I guess, but we were doing service dye work for other brands and designers and recognized that the supply and traceability of the dye in the first place was really, really lacking. So diving in here to create a solution where one didn't exist before has really been the result of many iterations, and there's not been a way to really plan out the path perfectly and stay on there. If you have a clear vision of your path, it's important to know where you want to go, absolutely, and put something in place so you sort of have a guiding North Star, but ultimately so many, as was mentioned, sort of peaks and valleys of creating the business or creating the roadmap and for your career that's going to work for you is really the result of working with tons of people, hearing where their real problems are, and then working together to create a solution. So, thanks.